Greetings, Hempster. Thank you for tuning in to another hemp episode of HempAware Radio. This is Tyler Hemp, your hemp-entrepreneurial host, here to empower and hemp-educate your hemposphere as usual, because it's hemportant. So here's the thing. Hemp entrepreneurs, hemp companies, and hemp enthusiasts around the world struggle to market and sell their products effectively. Not having the right tools, information, and resources to grow your business can make it very difficult to attract the right people that can really benefit from what you have to offer. But it doesn't have to be that way. And that's why at HempAware, we provide strategic marketing and branding services, as well as tools so that hemp entrepreneurs can transform the world with your products and services and transform the planet in a way that supports all life. So if you're struggling to get traffic to your website or convert that traffic into ongoing sales, and if you're needing help with your website design, marketing, branding in any way, just visit HempAware.com and check out some of the valuable resources that we have for hemp entrepreneurs and companies just like yours. On today's show, I'm excited to have a meaningful conversation with a colleague of mine, Courtney Moran, who is the Chief Legislative Strategist at Agricultural Hemp Solutions. And Courtney is expertly positioned. She's a champion when it comes to legal policy for hemp agribusiness success, with an impressive track record, I might say, for getting meaningful results in this industry. And Courtney worked closely with the offices of Senator Ron Wyden and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in Washington, D.C. to draft the Hemp Farming Act of 2018 and also negotiate the language included in that farm bill, which was the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, both of which led the federal legislation for hemp, which is really exciting. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and also the current state of the hemp world and the 2024 Farm Bill. So Courtney continues to work hard to dispel misinformation and spread awareness about exceptional benefits and untapped potential of hemp as an American-produced crop. Agricultural and farm workers in America, in America deserve access to affordable, versatile, and sustainable crop that is hemp without the outdated restrictions and red tape. So I'm honored and privileged to have Courtney on the show today. Thank you so much for being on another hemp episode of HempAware Radio, Courtney.
Thank you so much for having me, Tyler. I am such a fan of yours, and I'm so grateful to be here today.
Right on. So for our listeners that don't know who you are, maybe give us a little bit of background that led you up to working with hemp. How did you get into law? How did you merge the worlds of hemp and law? And what inspired you to get into the field that you're in?
That's an excellent question. So it goes back to, 16 years ago when I was a senior in college, and I was given the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes by Jack Hare and Chris Conrad. And I could not believe that this plant that was out there could clean up toxins in the soil and make thousands of sustainable products. And yet it was illegal for our farmers to grow because of the confusion with marijuana. And I grew up in the DARE program, like marijuana is this horrible, evil thing. And came to find out very quickly that was not the truth, but even further to see that hemp could be this amazing crop providing economic opportunity to our rural communities, but also just helping our environment and our soil. And so when I went to law school and I saw what that was all about, I found out that there was actually an internship, a legal internship at National Normal in Washington, D.C. And so I wrote to the founder, Keith Straub, and he called me up and we had a conversation, and he invited me out to DC that summer in 2010. And I went out there, and at the time there were only medical marijuana programs, but I was able to connect with the Normal team. I was able to connect with other lawyers around the country working on different cannabis initiatives. And once I finished law school and moved out to Oregon, I was able to kind of jump right in. And we didn't have any hemp programs. This was 2011, 2012. And I was doing medical marijuana criminal defense work at first, but knew very quickly that I really wanted to pursue hemp, even though it wasn't really a thing yet. So I went back to school. I earned a Master of Laws in Environmental and Natural Resources Law at Lewis and Clark, which I now teach the hemp law and policy course at the law school, and used that as a platform to start hosting educational events, connecting with our Department of Agriculture. Very quickly, the 2014 Farm Bill was signed into law, but unfortunately, that did not actually lead to the start of a program in Oregon. So I did what I could, connected with our congressional delegation, connected with farmers in the state, pushed our Department of Agriculture to get a program up and running, and we did so. And we encountered numerous hurdles that first year, especially with the marijuana industry and concerns about cross-pollination. And that is what actually led me to going into the Capitol. And my first times going down to the Capitol was just me as a citizen advocate for this plant, just because I cared so much, and I still care about this plant. And talked to the legislature. I was actually invited by our House Majority Leader from an email that I had sent them, and they invited me as invited testimony and gave testimony about what cross-pollination is and what it isn't, and what we could be doing to help the marijuana and the hemp programs work together. And one of the hemp licensees was in the audience at the time. They hired me on the spot to become their lobbyist. And that is what led to my very active involvement in advocacy and lobbying.
Wow. So you got a copy of The Emperor Wears No Clothes. You were already studying law at Lewis and Clark. And so it seems like at a very early stage in your career, you were like, this is what I'm doing with my degree, with my expertise. You knew this was the direction that you wanted to go, or were you still kind of unclear until later? I know you said 2010, you had the opportunity working with Normal as a legal intern to go to DC and represent, as a citizen advocate. But did you know right away, like, this is why I'm here? I want to represent the hemp and cannabis industry legally?
I think so. Yeah, I think I felt just called by this plant. And when I moved, so I received the book when I was actually a senior in college. And then during law school, which I attended in Minnesota, I went out to Normal. And so I found out, wow, there's all these other people, these other lawyers that care about this plant the way that I do. For a while, I thought I was the only one. And once I was able to meet this network, just seeing how much focus there was on marijuana. But for me, it was always about the environment and conservation and our planet. And there weren't any hemp programs. So I applied for different jobs at different environmental law firms, and it really just wasn't what I wanted, just to have some generic, legal practice. I wanted to do something. I wanted to accomplish something and make sure that when I leave this planet, that I'm leaving it in a better state because of the work and the effort that I have put in. And hemp was just right there and just calling to me. And I just knew that I had to pursue this no matter what the stakes were. And I went after it, and look where we are.
Yeah, doing amazing things. And, kind of on that point, I'm curious, what are in the 16 years that you've been exposed to this industry and involved in it, what would you say are some of the biggest turning points that you've been able to be a part of when it comes to whether it's legislation or just overall cultural consciousness or the market shifts? Like, what would you say are some of the biggest turning points for hemp and cannabis?
Oh, there's a lot. I would say these last 10 years have been monumental for cannabis and hemp reform. Since my internship at Normal, we've seen adult use legalization in the first states in 2012. We saw the 2014 Farm Bill, where we have authorization for hemp pilot program research. We see states starting to legalize hemp. I worked in numerous states, not only in Oregon, implementing and drafting their initial hemp legalization legislation. We saw the 2018 Farm Bill, which has been, the most significant piece of legislation, the most significant piece of policy for hemp. We have a federal definition for hemp. We have clear delineated lines of authority for USDA versus DEA for the first time in history or in recent history. I was able to win a case back in 2018 against the Postal Service that set the precedent for the transportation of hemp through the U.S. Postal Service pre-2018 Farm Bill. So that was significant to actually see the movement, see the transportation, see the authority, and intent of Congress being upheld. We've seen Congress continue to provide leadership and make sure that the program that they have implemented has been protected through appropriations acts, through letters sent to the agencies when they have issued guidance or even rules that are inconsistent with legislative intent. And so I think over the last 10 years, we've seen more support for both hemp and marijuana, for the cannabis plant as a whole, from our congressional delegations, from our agencies, from our state legislators, and from industry and stakeholders in rural communities, as well as consumers. I think for many decades, it was very consumer driven. It was black market. People wanted access to this product. People, did start up their own hemp businesses selling t-shirts and other items like that. But it really wasn't until we had these new federal definitions, these new opportunities that brought in this bigger economic opportunity that we started to really get the attention of other members of Congress, legislators, agencies, and even law enforcement. I think some law enforcement is very supportive of what's happened, and some are still very concerned about, some of the reefer madness type issues that have happened. And of course, that there are some very legitimate concerns about illegal activity and consumer safety. But I think we've seen just a major shift in thinking around this plant. And I think we are living in a very exciting time for
Most
policy.
Definitely. Yeah, and I'd like to kind of dive a little deeper into a couple of things that you mentioned. First and foremost, I would say the majority of our listeners understand and know the definition of hemp, or the federal definition. But if you don't mind, would you summarize what that legal definition is?
I would be happy to. And, when teaching my class, I really put emphasis on the definition of hemp because I just want to give a little history, because historically, all cannabis was classified as marijuana from as early as the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act until the 2014 Farm Bill. And the 2014 Farm Bill was the first time we had a federal definition for industrial hemp. And that was a delineation of cannabis of not more than 0.3% Delta 9 THC. When we get to the 2018 Farm Bill, we have a new definition for hemp, removing the word industrial and clarifying that hemp is anything below 0.3, including the derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids coming from that plant. And while the federal definition does refer to Delta 9, there is different implementation by the agencies, which leads to, different analyses on whether that's total THC or Delta 9 at what stage. But that's where the definition is at. So we have a clear distinction now in law delineating out hemp from the definition of marijuana in the Controlled Substances Act at that 0.3% THC level. And not based on what is being produced, but on that THC concentration itself.
So it means whether you're producing a fiber, a grain, a cannabinoid-based product, as long as that product itself remains under the 0.3%, it's considered legal hemp.
Correct. Yeah.
And so what does that mean if a farmer gets involved, they choose a variety of hemp that is known to consistently be within the threshold or under the threshold of 0.3%, and for some crazy reason it goes hot? What are some of the regulatory frameworks put in place? Like, what would happen to them if their plant or their crop ends up coming up hot or above that level?
Very important question. And this is something that has been addressed by USDA and by the states and the tribes in their state and tribal plans. And there is allowances for crops that go above 0.3, but up to certain levels. So the USDA adopted what's called the negligence threshold. So if someone produces a crop that's above 0.3, but not more than 1% total THC, that is only considered a negligent violation. And while they may still have to destroy that crop, that they would not have any criminal penalties for that production. Now, of course, there's variance in the testing and what's happening at the labs. And so there's this concept of a measure of uncertainty. And so as long as the result of the crop comes back and 0.3% is within that range of that measure of uncertainty, that crop is still legal. But unfortunately, we are still seeing that if crops test above the 0.3, that they can be destroyed, unfortunately.
Right. Now, this is a question I've never asked anyone or even done any research on, and I don't know that if you have, but if you have, I'm curious if you know, when it comes to the psychoactive effect of THC, do you have any idea at what point, like there's a threshold of, is it 1%, 2%, 3%, where if you consume a cannabis plant and obviously decarboxylate that or have it converted into THC from the THCA version, do you know at what point it becomes psychoactive? Like, is it 0.3 or is it higher than that?
Excellent question. So the research that I had done previously shows that there's potential for intoxication at 1%. And you have to look at the ratios of the cannabinoids in the plant, right? So you're looking at the ratio of THC to CBD, for example, to look at that potential for intoxication. But that's raw plant, right? I mean, now we're seeing what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening in the labs. There is isomerization of the cannabinoids. We're creating other isomers of THC, even from those low THC original thresholds in the plant. So that's a very different conversation, I think, of potential for intoxication if there is work being done in a lab versus what's just coming out of a plant itself.
So it's very contextual. It depends on the form of the material, if it's combined, if it's in its natural state, if it's an isomer, or if there's other cannabinoids with it that could potentiate the psychoactive effects and things of that nature.
Yeah. And, I think also there's these different conversations, right? Psychoactive means affecting the mind or body, right? So even a low CBD or a high CBD variety that has very low THC, that's theoretically psychoactive. It's going to have an effect on the body, right? Potentially on the mind. And I know not everyone likes the word intoxicating, but right, if we're thinking about like intoxicating threshold, that's more of what we're really thinking and talking about when we're talking about THC and those isomers. And so, right, if we have high THCA flower, really that's marijuana, right? There's different legal arguments on what that is. And, that's a separate conversation. But high THCA, right, there is going to be that intoxicating threshold. If you just have a low THCA, which, gets, of course, converted into Delta-9 when it's heated, then that's going to have a different impact and effect.
That makes sense. And before we go on to my next question that you had addressed in your 16 years of experience, are you familiar with the idea of seed production and sort of the, I guess you could say, maturation or the voluptuousness of seeds and the effect of THC on seed production? Is that anything that you've looked into? Or like, I know Paul Stanford, I think, has said in the past that higher THC levels could actually contribute to larger seed production, which could be a benefit to the hemp industry. But I'm curious if you have any thought on that or research.
I don't have any research on that. I have heard that if there is slightly higher THC, that there could potentially be more oil production within the seeds or larger seeds. But I don't have I don't have the science on that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think we also have to be thinking about like, what is the intended use, right? Are we trying to grow a plant out for flower? Are we trying to grow it out for the grain? Are we trying to grow it out for floral material and for cannabinoids, whether they're, THC or other minor cannabinoids?
Totally. Yeah. And we're definitely going to bring that up here because I know that's a big part of your work now is the grain and fiber side of things. So I look forward to getting into that. But before we do, you had mentioned a case with regard to the U.S. Postal Service and the transportation of hemp. I would love to kind of open up that can of worms, so to speak. Would you mind telling me a little bit of a background on that? Like what led up to that? Were there specific challenges or problems that hemp companies were facing with shipping hemp products? And that kind of led to you opening up this case with them? And what did that look like?
Yeah, excellent question. It was a very exciting moment, really, when we won this case, because this set national precedent. And so while it was an administrative decision within the Postal Service itself, this did set national precedent for the transportation of hemp through the U.S. Postal Service. So what had happened is that there was a company in Colorado who had shipped a package to Utah that contained CBD, and it was seized in transit. And the Postal Service and the Postal Inspection Service had determined it was non-mailable because it was considered a Schedule 1. And of course, my client had been operating under the 2014 Farm Bill. They had all their licensing. Their product was below the 0.3. The crop they had came from below the 0.3 threshold. And so we appealed and said, this absolutely is mailable. We have federal authority. We have state authority to allow these products to be shipped. And so we went through a full appeal process with the U.S. Postal Service, and the Postal Service had looked at CBD, thought that it was scheduled based on an opinion from the DEA that they were saying that CBD was scheduled and weren't delineating out the difference between, cannabinoid source from industrial hemp that was grown under a pilot program versus cannabinoids that were sourced from marijuana, which would have only had potential state legal authority and, of course, no federal legal authority. And so we argued that based on the authority granted in the 2014 Farm Bill, the compliance with the 2014 Farm Bill agricultural pilot programs and the state program, the opinion from the Ninth Circuit from the HIV DEA case that said that the 2014 Farm Bill preempted the Controlled Substances Act, and then the subsequent authority that Congress had issued through the Appropriations Acts to specifically protect the transportation and use of hemp and hemp products that were compliant with the 2014 Farm Bill, we were able to convince the judicial officer that these products were mailable, and that there was a difference between products that were derived from hemp that were produced in compliance with the 2014 Farm Bill versus products that were coming from marijuana, which of course were still in Schedule 1. So it was significant, and the Postal Service had, debates about what would this mean for their inspections and their enforcement. But the judge looked to the letter of the law and sided with hemp. And it was incredible, really.
That's amazing and very cool. I mean, even to this day, my partners and I own Bulk Hemp Warehouse, which, we're distributing hemp fabrics and hemp rope and hemp seeds and hemp seed oil. And we still run into issues of product being denied by certain carriers saying, I can't ship this. And so have you been able to subsequently utilize that case law in other situations to sort of convince other carriers to continue to ship legal hemp products?
Yes, absolutely. So the original decision applied specifically to CBD. We had a subsequent decision. I had numerous appeals going with the Postal Service at the time. We had a subsequent decision that approved the shipment of hemp seeds. Mm-hmm. And then following that, then the 2018 Farm Bill was signed into law. And with the authority from the case, which is KAB LLC versus USPS, and the 2018 Farm Bill, UPS updated what is called Publication 52, which is their authority around the shipment of controlled substances and updated language for hemp.
Cool.
And then following that, I was actually working with some folks at UPS, and they developed a pilot program for the shipment of hemp. And they actually have a program where businesses can register, they get verification, they go through, like a little kind of background thing to make sure that the companies are legitimate. And then they have documents that they can keep with their shipments that they can utilize. I know some carriers are still very reluctant to ship products, even if they're hemp grain and fiber products, which is why we need to get the Industrial Hemp Act passed. But it has definitely led to easing some concerns and having that federal guidance and authority that these products can be shipped.
That's awesome. Great work on that. It's so essential. It's really challenging for hemp companies still running into barriers and challenges with banking and freight companies that aren't allowing this completely legal crop to be shipped in its many forms. And so the work you're doing is instrumental and very important. And I appreciate that. And so to kind of shift gears, like going from looking at the history and kind of coming up till today, and also bringing up Agricultural Hemp Solutions, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the mission of Agricultural Hemp Solutions, like the purpose of forming this organization. What was the inspiration to form this organization and the mission and purpose around it?
Yeah, so Agricultural Hemp Solutions is my national lobbying and government relations firm. And so I had done a lot of work in Oregon under the Oregon Industrial Hemp Farmers Association, which is a nonprofit that I ran from 2015 until 2023. But we were confined within the state of Oregon, and I was being called to numerous other states to help them with their legislation. And as such, I needed an entity, right? And so I actually formed Agricultural Hemp Solutions with Janelle Ralph initially. We were working on legislation together. I'm now the sole owner, but she and I worked very, very closely together in a couple different states, working on the initial hemp legislation legalization language, and also worked very closely on the 2018 Farm Bill. She would come to DC and run the halls of Congress with me. And the goal of Agricultural Hemp Solutions is to really be that voice for the industry and to provide the guidance and the education and the leadership that is needed to effectively and strategically make legislative change. There's a lot of organizations out there and they do a lot of great things for their members. But sometimes when you have a large organization, members have a lot of different interests, and it's a little bit more challenging to actually get things across the finish line. And so with Agricultural Hemp Solutions, we have been very successful in passing legislation throughout the country and federally. And our goal is really to ensure that we legalized hemp, and that hemp actually became a legal agricultural commodity on a federal level that could then be implemented across the board, across the United States, but has since transitioned to really focus on making sure that we are working to open up markets and that we are stabilizing the supply chain, and doing that through legislation and rulemaking that actually supports and advances the business interests of our hemp stakeholders, whether they're farmers, whether they're grain or fiber manufacturers, whether they're cannabinoid manufacturers, and just overall agribusinesses that are engaged in working with the hemp plant.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're doing work not only on a federal level, but also being able to go into specific states to help develop legislation for specific states. Because to my knowledge, the Farm Bill essentially set the framework for the industrial hemp market, but then each state can establish their own regulatory framework and licensing framework for their particular states. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The 2018 Farm Bill really is the base, right? So the 2018 Farm Bill gave us our new federal definition. It took that definition out of the Controlled Substances Act, so move authority from the DEA to the USDA, and then set out a regulatory framework on production. But that authority really ends there. And so some states, needed guidance in their implementation. We coordinated with USDA on the rulemakings that led to the final rules for the production programs. We helped with states in working on their state plans through that process. But now there's a lot of work being done on what's happening on the regulation of manufacturing and what's happening with end products. And so we've been, and on both the cannabinoid and the grain and fiber side. And so we have been working with different states to help with that type of policy. And then, of course, going back to Congress in preparation for this farm bill and working on the Industrial Hemp Act.
Excellent. So in your experience and seeing these different legislative acts and bills and frameworks being put into place, would you say there's a specific state that has done it right, that have used the federal farm bill as their foundation and then rolled out a framework that is very supportive to farmers, makes it low barrier of entry, affordable? Like, is there one state that is kind of the poster child for establishing their frameworks or regulatory licensing processes?
I think that's hard. That's a hard question to answer. I would say on the grain and fiber side, Montana does stick out to me. They have implemented performance-based sampling. They have been very supportive of the grain and fiber sectors and making sure that those farmers and operations are supported. And we did coordinate closely with them in working on Industrial Hemp Act, because we know that if the grain and fiber sectors are going to thrive and get to the scale that we know that they can be at, we need that type of authority nationwide. On the cannabinoid side, there are some states that are, very lenient on manufacturing and regulations. There are some states that have become very restrictive within the guise of, public and consumer safety. And I think it's challenging to say one is doing it better than the other, because it depends who you're talking to, right? If you're looking at a regulator, they're going to say the more restrictive programs are more effective and more safe for the overall, consumer market. But then if you're talking to industry, they're going to look to states that have kind of an open market policy and where they can sell whatever they want. And so it really is, what perspective are you looking at? And I think this state patchwork that we've seen is problematic, not only for industry, but also for regulators and for law enforcement, because what might be legal in state A is not legal in state B. How do we manage this? And so there is a lot of focus and attention on Congress right now and the federal agencies as to what are we going to move forward into with, what are the definitions, who has what authority over what products are or are not legal right now. What does the future taxation structure look like? Things like that. How do we manage between, marijuana products and industrial hemp products?
Right. So the current farm bill that you're drafting and working on, the Industrial Hemp Act of 2023, is it? Or is it 24 now? It basically carves out the exemptions for hemp grain and fiber, but it also has languaging around the cannabinoid side of things.
So the farm bill right now is currently in negotiation. The farm bill, the 2018 farm bill actually expired in September of 2023, but through the continuing appropriations language, the continuing resolution, that authority was extended out for one additional year. So the 2018 farm bill is in play until September 30th of 2024. So language right now is still in negotiation and being worked on. One of those pieces is the Industrial Hemp Act of 2023, which is S980 and HR 3755. So it's a bipartisan, bicameral piece of legislation. And what the Industrial Hemp Act does is it creates a new sub-definition for industrial hemp. So we're bringing the industrial back. And that definition is looking to only the harvested material of the stalk, fiber, and the grain or seeds to produce those particular crops. And then it sets out a new regulatory framework for farmers that elect to only grow grain or fiber crops. It does not impact the cannabinoid sector.
Mm-hmm.
The cannabinoid conversation, that is alive and well. And what is going to happen on that side is yet to be determined. There are numerous offices and different organizations and stakeholders all working on this language. There are a lot of different interests at play. And so exactly where Congress is going to fall on the cannabinoid side is still undetermined.
Okay. So in terms of the 2018 Farm Bill, which is still the operating umbrella, what would you say is some of the languaging in there currently that is affecting fiber and seed farmers? And what sort of tweaks or things would you implement to help make that more friendly toward their efforts?
The first thing would be the definition, right? When we were working on the 2018 Farm Bill, we were very conscious of the need to clarify that anything below 0.3 was hemp, because we saw from 2014 to 2018 that the federal agencies were attempting to change the definition of industrial hemp, trying to limit it only to grain and seed, trying to limit transportation, trying to limit sales and the marketing research. And so we knew we had to send a very clear signal to the agencies. When we say 0.3, we mean 0.3. It's based on THC content. It's not about end use. And so we took the word industrial out. We added the language around derivatives and extracts and cannabinoids, language that came from the original definition of marijuana, actually. And that was a very clear signal to the agencies. When we say 0.3, we mean 0.3. Not foreseeing that the focus on a regulatory framework that protected cannabinoids would have a negative impact on grain and fiber. Just like you said, you're selling, t-shirts and other fiber products, right? But you're still having issues with your shipment. We have grain manufacturers who struggle to get investment capital because they go into meetings, and even though they're selling food ingredients, the narrative quickly goes to, well, what cannabinoids are in your products? Where is FDA on this, even though they've been given GRAS status? Or we have hemp fiber companies that have issues getting loans from banks because they are not considered a small business, because they're considered this special hemp business that has to go through all of these additional checks, which isn't right for either side. But it's been very clear to us the additional struggles that the grain and fiber sectors are going through because of the conversations that are happening on the cannabinoid side, and the additional hurdles that the farmers are also having to go through by getting a background check when they're growing a food crop, having to have their crop tested when the parts of the plant coming off the field don't even have THC in them, or the THC is getting destroyed in the field. So getting this carve out for the grain and fiber sectors by giving them their own definition to point to, it can change the narrative in their conversations, help when they're engaging in, different activities, to say, no, we are industrial hemp. These are the things we are working on. We are not part of this other cannabinoid conversation. But also wanting to make sure that when we give this clear authority to grain and fiber, that we are not negatively impacting cannabinoids. Cannabinoids have led the path for hemp in the United States. The CBD industry is really what helped get this off the ground. And it has helped so many people all over the world. And so we absolutely have to acknowledge that. And we want to protect the farmers that are growing the cannabinoid crops and all the businesses and manufacturers that have put a lot of time and money and effort into developing their businesses. We just need to make sure that not only are they protected, but that the products going into the marketplace are safe.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a fine balance of that free and open market approach, and then making sure that people's health and safety are protected, which is why this legislation is so important, and the languaging is very important. So to I guess kind of go deeper into the grain and fiber side of things. I mean, the languaging that you're developing is to lessen the burden for American farmers, to make it easier for them to get involved. If someone were to come to Agricultural Hemp Solutions, let's say they own a hemp farming business, or they're doing a hemp processing business, or maybe manufacturing, what are some of the use cases or reasons why they would come to your organization? And like, what does that hiring process look like, or in what ways would you be able to serve them, and how does that look?
Excellent question. So I have two companies. So I have Agricultural Hemp Solutions, which is our government relations lobbying firm. And then I also have my own law firm, Earth Law LLC. So we can offer a variety of different services between the two entities. So with Agricultural Hemp Solutions, folks come to us, whether they're farmers, they're manufacturers, they're end product producers that are having issue with policy. They aren't happy with the rules that were developed in their state or federally. They need state or federal legislation change to help with their operations or to help with the overall flow of the supply chain. And they come to us with their issue, and we coordinate to work with them to find a solution. And that's what we do. We bring solutions to the appropriate body, whether it is a regulatory agency, a state legislature, or to Congress themselves. And we've been very successful in accomplishing our clients' goals. We strive to ensure that the policy we work on is helping everyone, not just one business. Mm-hmm. And we really want to help folks understand that they can have an impact. We can bring their voice to their capital, and we can make a change. And we've seen it happen state by state and federally. And so we've been very successful in actually passing legislation and turning our clients' policy goals into law.
That's awesome. So whether somebody has encountered a situation that they need help with to get out of, whether it's litigation or something related to hemp or cannabis products, you can kind of help them get out of that situation, or preemptively, if somebody can see something down the road where there's maybe certain legislation that needs to be altered or changed to prevent things from happening, you can help in both situations.
Yes, absolutely. So with the law firm, Earth Law LLC, we do a lot of different work. We do handle administrative appeals, whether it's with an agency on licensing or a corrective action plan, working with law enforcement on product seizures. We provide regulatory guidance, updating on state laws, whether they're pending or enacted, or even rulemakings. We provide expert testimony, either in cases or at administrative hearings or even legislative hearings, but then also work on compliance and helping folks to actually understand what the law really is, not just what some folks want the law to be, to make sure that when they're putting their products into market, that they do understand what the laws are. So we provide 50 state product analyses. We help folks with their specific products and their specific operations, because we've seen firms put out these generic opinions telling people, oh, yes, you can do something. And then they rely on that. And next thing you know, they're getting charged with felonies. So we make sure that is not happening for our clients. Awesome. If it does happen, that we are there to support them through the process.
Right on. Well, this has been a very insightful conversation. I appreciate your work and diligence and commitment to really making a big difference in the world with hemp and doing what you're doing. And just kind of as a few parting questions, my next question to you is more related to, it could be those listeners out there that are just users of hemp. They consume CBD products, or they love wearing hemp, or maybe it's the hemp businesses that are listening in. What are some of the things that these groups can do as individuals or as businesses to help continue to move this progress forward, whether it's on a market level or a legislative level? What are some of the suggestions that you would have for users versus businesses?
Yeah, for consumers, I would say be very smart in what you're purchasing. Make sure that you are able to access information on your products so you know where they're coming from. You should be able to either go right to a website, scan a QR code, and know what is actually in your products. And if you can't get that information, I'd be very wary of the products. Continue to support hemp businesses. It's been a struggling market, and there are a lot of families that have really gone out on the line to get this industry up and running. And so all the support people can provide with their dollar is really important. For businesses, I would say, number one, make sure that the products you're putting out there are safe. Anyone that is a bad actor just putting products out there, they are impacting the integrity of our entire industry and leading to more restrictive policies than I think likely are necessary for the good actors that are out there. Also, for businesses, make sure you're paying attention to the rules and the legislation. If you don't like what's happening, call us. We're happy to help. But show up at the hearings, participate in your agency rulemakings, go to your legislature, participate in your legislative hearings, call your members of Congress, because you really do have the ability to have an impact. And if you're not comfortable making those calls, call Agricultural Hemp Solutions, call Earth Law. We are available to help you. We can help you and guide you through the process and even help you prepare testimony. But it's just, I think, important to make sure that you understand that you can have an impact. You don't just have to sit here and deal with some policy that you don't like. You can go and do something about it. But it is critical to be a good actor, be in compliance, and to make sure that the products you're putting out there are safe.
Excellent. Great answer. I completely agree. It's all about, consumer safety, making sure that people have good, high quality products and can trust this industry. We've had almost 100 years of this demonization, making this plant the evil weed from hell. And so with the work that you're doing and amazing groups like yours, we can give this plant a story that is true and really allow it to shine and express its true potential for food and shelter and clothing and energy and plastics and medicine and fuel and all these incredible things that we can replace that are, destroying our planet currently. And so it really excites me to see the work that you're doing. And if you haven't already, go check out agriculturalhempsolutions.com, everyone. And as a parting question, Courtney, I want to kind of take it a little bit on the more philosophical level and sort of put you on the spot here. But if you had, let's say, 60 seconds to stand in front of the entire world audience, and they said, the world is your stage. You can share one message with every human being on the planet. It could be related to hemp or just anything at all. What would you want to make sure that every human being on the planet knows?
I would say that we are all divine beings and that there is love supporting us, and that if we carry our own light and path forward and are operating with integrity and operating to provide good and carry that love forward, then we can all do wonderful, amazing things for each other. And I think that's what this hemp plant has always been about, providing essentially everything that we really need to survive, and it being part of this overall solution for protecting the planet and protecting humanity and really coming together as one.
Amen. I couldn't have said it better myself. I love your approach and spirit and what you guys are doing at Agricultural Hemp Solutions. So thank you for joining me on another hemp episode. It's been fun.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another hemp episode of HempAware Radio. If you have any ideas on what you want to hear next, just email us at support@hempaware.com and we'll definitely consider your suggestions. Thanks everyone for tuning in to HempAware Radio.